Could France end up with a president who claims that multicultural societies are multi-conflict societies? Marine Le Pen is getting closer. Indeed, she's narrowed the gap with President Emmanuel Macron in a very big way, and with just 12 months to go until the French people decide. This is Roundtable. Very good to have your company. I'm David Foster. Well, Macron has been condemned for his handling of the pandemic and has recently introduced tough new restrictions with COVID cases on the rise again. The countdown is on for France's presidential elections. With a year to go, polls are showing that the far-right leader, Marine Le Pen, has a better chance of winning than ever before. According to a Harris Interactive poll, Macron and Le Pen would be the top two in the first round, each picking up about 25% of the vote, far ahead of other candidates. Current predictions are that Macron would still defeat Le Pen in a runoff with 53% of the vote. Yet in 2017, Macron won against Le Pen with 66% of the vote. Experts claim that was the result of most mainstream politicians from both the left and the right urging voters to rally behind Macron to prevent the far right from gaining power. But this time, analysts say Macron may struggle to attract left-leaning voters after his pro-business economic reforms and treatment of the yellow vest protesters. The COVID-19 crisis, immigration, Islam and secularism seem to be the main election issues at the moment. With a year to go, how might this election campaign play out? I am delighted to be able to say that we can welcome back to the Roundtable for this edition of the programme Nabila Ramdani, French journalist joining us out of London, and we say hello for the first time to Raphael Liogier in Marseille, a sociologist and professor at the University of Aix-Marseille. Thank you both for coming on the programme. Raphael, you first. You believe that Marine Le Pen has a good chance of making it to the Elysee Palace if she gets past the first round of voting. What a change that is.
Yes, she has a chance to get to the Elysee Palace if she gets to the second round, and if it is Emmanuel Macron that is in front of her in the second round. I think that time, yes, she'll get a good chance. Before, the other 5 years ago, that wasn't the same, and even 5 years ago, it wasn't the same because there was still some kind of a psychological war, I can say, against extreme far right and all that. But she succeeded in some kind of, in normalizing herself in the public, in the political landscape. So I think, yes.
So she has to some extent rebranded herself.
Yeah, she did that, and she did that even by I could say even expulsing her own father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, because she thought that was a problem. The image he has to be too extreme was a problem, and after she even rebranded as you said, but even the name of the party that was called National Front, that looked a little bit to going to war, etc. And so she renamed it Rassemblement National. Rassemblement National, that means that let's get together and not go to war, but let's get together. So she tried to really normalize herself. Her father. Some people said that he didn't want to get to the Elysee Palace. He wanted to be a force of opposition. But she really wants to get power. And I think now she's reached to the point where it's kind of possible. And also she's a woman, and so there are many factors that.
Okay, Nabila, do you believe that Marine Le Pen has changed in any real way at all, or is what we're seeing just cosmetic, simply to appeal to a different type of voter?
Well, absolutely, it's absolutely cosmetic. Remember that her party and the Le Pen dynasty remains one firmly associated with Islamophobia, anti-Semitism and racism. And I honestly don't believe that the French are currently heading towards making the leader of a party like that head of state. And remember that her father actually remains honorary president of her party. He remains the major donor of the party as well. And you see a lot of polls being bandied around at the moment, but the polls always show what they want to show, basically, which is that the Le Pen dynasty has considerable support in France, but it never really extended beyond a protest vote. And that is to say, around 1/5 of the electorate, that gets the Marine Le Pen, or before her, her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, into the second round of the presidential election, where a majority of French voters will always vote against them in head-to-head. And I know that predictions are risky in the age of Trump, Brexit, and even COVID-19. But I don't think that Marine Le Pen has any chance of becoming a president of France. And a fact that is often overlooked is that she struggled to become an MP for years. And her party, the Rassemblement National, currently has a grand total of 7 seats in the French parliament. Macron has almost 300, which is typical of French presidents.
Yeah, and we must not forget that at the moment he is still ahead in the polls. We will save any kind of description about a future Le Pen presidency till a little bit later on. But let me ask you this one, Nabila. Is it that she has gained popularity, or that he has become increasingly unpopular? Because although, as I say, he's in the lead, that lead has narrowed enormously.
I think Marine Le Pen has been doing what she always does, which is to be an extremist politician, trying to stigmatize communities from ethnic minority backgrounds, and especially Muslims, to chase the far right vote. As far as Macron is concerned, there is no doubt at all that Macron is very well aware of the sizable far right vote in France and how crucial it is at election times. And that's why he's putting so much effort trying to win as much of it as he can. And in order to do so, he has appointed the most reactionary interior minister in years. And that's saying something. French interior ministers are always right-wing and always brutal, but Gérald Darmanin is even worse. And more than that, he has very clear prejudices against Muslims, and among his flagship policies at the moment are a separatism act to combat the myth that Muslims live within separate communities. And
Okay, let me come to Raphael on this one. Macron painted himself in the last election as being neither from the left nor from the right. As Nabila suggests, it looks as though he's gone a little bit further to the right. She says a great deal further to the right. But why has he done that?
The fact of the matter is that I don't think it means much now to talk about right and left. I think it's much, as a matter of fact, it will be more rigorous to talk about what we could call identitarism on one side, and people that are more liberal on the other side. And that's what Emmanuel Macron was at first. Before he was elected, he was in the liberal part, in front of Marine Le Pen, that was the identitarist or populist one, that thinks that we are in a state of emergency, we are surrounded by threats around us. And the fact
but
is
what
that
is he now? What has he become?
And now he has become populist again, step by step. But I want to come back a little bit with what the other person said, because I don't agree with her on one specific aspect. I think Marine Le Pen has changed. She's not in the continuity of Jean-Marie Le Pen, and it's worse, because it's why she's dangerous. And I can tell you exactly what she has done. It has changed around 2003. I've studied that with my students, the discourses and how she worked that on. Before 2003, the concept of laïcité, which is political secularism in France that is very important in the French culture. Jean-Marie Le Pen said that laïcité itself, political secularism, was some kind of a Jewish plot against our culture, right? Marine Le Pen today, she said that laïcité is part of our patrimony to be defended. And it's when she shifted from anti-Semitism to Islamophobia, you know? And so she started to become some kind of a defender, a hero of laïcité, when laïcité became a way to say that we have to neutralize the Islamic, so to say, Islamic danger, communautarism, etc., etc., etc. And at that time, there wasn't any talk anymore about anti-Semitism. And that's also the reason why she expels his father, at least from the public scene, because she knew that he would not work with this anti-Semitism. So,
Nabila.
The bottom line is Marine Le Pen is still called the Le Pen, and she's still her father's daughter, and that's how she's very much viewed in France.
Okay.
And
therefore, can we draw a line under that particular part of the discussion? Because I want to get on to Macron himself, and apart from identifying, you think more hard line tendencies, you talk about Darmanin, Nabila. What else has he done wrong? Where has he lost the support of the French people to this extent?
Well, the French left is massively divided in France at the moment, and they are not satisfied at all with their own leaders, let alone with Macron, who is right of center and moving further to the right all the time. Macron is hardly a leftist figure. Yes, his first senior position was in a socialist government under François Hollande, but he's a former merchant banker and finance minister who has made his way in politics as an absolute maverick. And he built up his own political movement.
Okay, so just to summarize, and I have to be as strict with you as I was with Raphael, he appealed to the left. They supported him in the last election. He's now lost that support. So what I'm going to do now is take a look at something that he said on television when he was announcing the latest lockdown.
Je sais combien.
I know how difficult the efforts I am asking of you are. I know the consequences for our country and for your lives. And you also know that we have done everything to take these decisions as late as possible and at a time when they were strictly necessary. That is now. But at the same time, I would like to tell you this evening that, thanks to vaccinations, the end of the crisis is finally in sight.
So, Raphael, is he trying perhaps too hard in this to sound presidential, to sound a patrician figure, a father of the nation?
No, I think he started to say that he wanted to be external, to not mix himself with everyday life, to be a real president, but he couldn't do that, and he mixed himself with everything all the time. But his main mistake has been, I think, to try to hunt into the Marine Le Pen public, identity things, Islam. Well, at first he didn't want to deal with these kind of things, and he did that. So now he has lost the support of the left wing, his voters that comes from the left. When he said he was neither left nor right, in a way that was true. That's the reason why there was so many people that were voting for him. But now it's still true, but in another way, in a negative way, because he has lost the support of the former socialists that will vote for him. But in the same time, it doesn't convince the right wing.
And what has he done during the last 12 months? And going back a little bit further, that with the Gilets jaunes, what has he done in the last 12 months to lose the ordinary French voter because of the handling of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's not only the pandemic adds to it to show a president that pretended, as you said earlier, to be like the father of the nation, and looks more like a volatile teenager that changed always his decision And so we don't really trust him. He said there will not be confinement, and eventually there is confinement, but not really a confinement, etc., etc. And we have the feeling that is when you ask people in the street, it's what they answer. They say we can't trust him anymore. And because he changed always his decisions on every aspect. For instance, there was this thing about Islamo-gauchism. They said there is Islamo-gauchism everywhere, Islamo-leftism, sorry, everywhere in the universities. It's so full, etc. It's his own minister of higher education and research that said it. So of course she was allowed to say it, and he saw that he went too far, and he said that it's not true. He went against her afterwards. So we don't know anymore. We don't trust him anymore.
And it's a matter of trust. In a little while, I want to come back to you because of something you said at the beginning, in which you said if Macron makes it through the first round, as if he might not make it through the first round. I'll ask you for your potential candidates for that in just a moment. But Nabila, let me put this one to you. If he has a lot of work to do to retain a chance of going back into the Élysée Palace as the French president, what does Emmanuel Macron have to do? What does he have to change in the next 12 months?
Well, I think a lot of the promises that he made during his latest campaign were not delivered. And anything that radical that Macron's administration was trying to do came unstuck well before 3 years when the coronavirus pandemic struck in early 2020. He had started trying to deconstruct the state, cutting the number of civil servants and boosting the private sector, for example. But now his administration is by default the most left-wing for generations. It's pouring out billions to keep a relatively unproductive economy afloat, while much of the French workforce sits at home effectively.
Sorry, let me get this right. You say it is very left-wing because of the size of the state, and yet everybody else seems to say that Macron, has moved more to the right.
Well, his economic policies have by default and by necessity shifted to the left because of the coronavirus pandemic, which will have a huge influence on all upcoming elections because it is now the biggest political issues of our times. It covers politics, economics, health, social issues, and anything else you care to mention. And
is there anything that he's done in the course of the last 12 months which commends itself to the voters with regard to the COVID pandemic?
Well, he hasn't had time to do much. I mean, for a start, 4 years in office is a tiny amount of time for any politicians to get sustainable results. But the way politicians, an important point to bear in mind is that general elections often turn to be general rejections, and who knows, someone like Macron could easily find this out following a disastrous COVID-19 performance.
So, Raphael, let me ask you this one. Is he a victim of what seems to befall so many politicians? Events, dear boy, events. In other words, you cannot predict what's going to come up. And if something bad happens on your watch, then you're going to get the blame for it. Or is he not a very good president per se, generally?
No, I don't think he's really the victim of events. Of course, there was many events, because when we are talking, for instance, about the yellow jacket, in a way we could see like he has to face something. But I think in a way he was also making it happen. So because it's politics, so it's hard to say. But what I would say, I think he's more the victim of his own desire to follow the polls. In fact, he's becoming step by step the opposite of Angela Merkel. You can hate Angela Merkel, but you can't deny when she does something, she does it because she believes it's the best for Germany, for the people of Germany, etc., etc. But Emmanuel Macron, it comes a time when even the supporter don't believe he does it because he believes it. It's what is happening now in France, really.
And can you give our viewers an example of what you mean, how that's happened, where he said one thing that he believes in, and then, oh, hang on, I'm changing my mind?
No, I'll tell you, he will not say he changed his mind, but he will actually change it, but not saying, he always saying, in fact, that he's right, that what he has done is fine, he hasn't made a mistake, contrary to Angela Merkel, who says she has made mistake, etc. But in the same time, he does opposite things. I give you a very good example. He said that there is no problem with Islam in France. We love Muslims. Laicity works perfectly, etc., etc. And 1 month later, is pushing an act of parliament, a law against separatism, focalizing on Muslims, targeting Muslim people. And it's always like that. And it was like that with the coronavirus. So the point is the fact is that it feels now in France that he doesn't have a real politics, that he's so obsessed by his re-election that in fact he doesn't care about people, he doesn't care even about the consequences.
Okay, hold on to the thought which I suggested earlier, that you identify potential third parties to come into this election, for just a moment. But let me go to Nabila on this one. Raphael has there talked about Islam and the demonization, as some see it, of the Muslim faith in France. How big a role will that play in this election?
Well, it's likely to play a very important role because, in very simple terms, Muslims are a large religious and cultural minority in France, and they potentially provide millions of votes. And in this sense, they are like any other influential group in society, and politicians want to impress them and indeed gain their votes. The difference in France, of course, is that the society is a secular one, where religious and cultural factors are officially banned from electioneering. So nobody is officially allowed to chase the Muslim vote. But I can assure you that, on the contrary, we are likely to see extremist politicians like Marine Le Pen or indeed Macron chasing the far right vote, because they all recognize that it represents a sizable part of the voters.
Given the fact that you don't believe Marine Le Pen is likely to be the next president of France, how likely is it that it will be Macron, and what kind of president would he be second time around? Nabila, you first.
Macron has come to power because he convinced the electorate through the power of his personality and indeed not any kind of ideology. And he always claims to be an absolute pragmatist who wants to reform the state by cutting back on welfare and the cradle to grave ethos, which many feel is unsustainable within the highly competitive.
Okay, so maybe he has to work on that if he gets back to the Elysee Palace. Raphael, let me ask you, you mentioned outriders here, people who may come up on the outside, to use a horse racing analogy. Who other than Le Pen or Macron?
The fact is that right now, if you look at the Socialist Party, there is really nobody, because the Socialist Party doesn't almost not exist anymore. And if you look at the classical right, they are fighting with each other, and there is no real candidate that could be a threat. But I think there is one person that doesn't talk a lot, and it's what makes him a better candidate, possible candidate, and I think he has understood it. It's Edouard Philippe, his former prime minister, because he's very high in the polls. He doesn't try to do much. He has a reputation of being someone even more pragmatic than Macron. I think if Les Républicains, the classical right, if they are able to overcome their egoistic fights, and they give him the possibility to, if they label him, I don't know how I can say that.
If it's not to be Macron, if it's not to be Edouard Philippe, Nabila, what would you make of Marine Le Pen as president of France?
I think it has to be somebody who shows the ability to deal with the pandemic as a global issue. It's going to be a crucial matter in the upcoming elections, and societies have to work out how to apply global policies to their own circumstances.
But do you rule her out as possibly being not only president, but being a reasonable president?
Marine Le Pen is economically illiterate. She has no clue whatsoever about how the world works, and she won't be trusted to handle such a serious issue. And the way politicians have failed with their COVID-19 policies will, of course, affect their electoral chances.
Okay, not the last word indeed, Nabila. Very quick last word from you, Raphael. Would she be a disaster, or would we just have to wait and see?
I think she'll be actually a disaster, but I'm not sure that she'll not be elected. The only thing is that on the short term, when it comes to a debate and it becomes a technical debate, she always fails. So I think that the chance we have she will not be elected is like when she'll have to talk, she might lose.
Raphael, thank you. When it comes to a debate, there's no doubt that you would be able to fill all the time available. Listen, many thanks for coming on the program. We hope to have you back. Nabila, great to have your company once again. Fascinating look ahead to what might happen in the next 12 months and who could be the next president of France. From me, David Foster, thank you wherever you happen to be for watching this edition of Roundtable. Do come back and join us on another occasion. Until then, a very goodbye to you all.